What's going on, fam? Welcome back to the channel. This is the 1 month review of the Adidas X Speedportal Plus in this amazing pink colorway. This is of course the updated version without the Carbitex insert in it. Without further ado, let's hop into the sole plate of this football boot. So the sole plate is the exact same construction with the stability wing and stud layout, stud pattern in the FG model as the one previously. It just changed the insert on the inside of the sole plate. So instead of having the Carbitex insert, it's now got this plastic kind of honeycomb shape to it, or golf ball kind of texture to it. It doesn't have the same amount of snapback, although it does have quite a bit more than things like a GX, or honestly even a New Balance Furon, I would say, in the speed category. It is still very, very responsive. It's a nice stud pattern. I really like this stud plate and the way it feels underfoot, even on an AG pitch. So this is totally safe for AG and FG. I would say the studs are short enough to be totally fine on AG, but also long enough to give you a good amount of grip on FG pitches as well. So no issues there. The shape is wide enough that it's going to fit, I would say, most foot types, so long as your foot is not egregiously wide in sort of this lateral area. My foot is quite wide in this, but it still was totally fine. And I actually wear the 99 point leather Speedportals, the kind of the remake leather version of this boot all the time, and that's my current game boot. So this sole plate, just in general, the shape is actually really good. It just lacks a bit of that specialness that I think the Carbitex added to it. And so for me, the sole plate is going to get a 7 out of 10. Now let's move on to the heel area. So the heel area of this football boot is, just because it is a laceless football boot, you do get a little bit of slippage. It is the same as the previous sort of half generation with the Carbitex insert. So it's the same very significantly padded with a little bit of kind of grip element or grip mesh almost on that inside. And it does do a nice job of wrapping your Achilles. It's super comfortable, I would say, but just because of this laceless construction, the heel area just isn't as comfortable as I think it would be with laces. And that's one thing we'll talk about with lockdown a little bit later. But I would say the heel area, it's okay. I would say it's a little bit below average for what I'm looking for in a boot. So for that, it's going to get a 6 out of 10. For me, the upper is where this football boot really shines. It's a super thin, super nice and pliable mesh that gives you a true one-to-one sensation on the ball. It's a little bit thinner on the lateral side and the medial side here, and then it's got a little bit more thickness through for structure on kind of the middle of the foot here. Sorry about that wind noise if that's super insane right now. But I would say that this upper is one of the best in the speed boot category for sure. They don't have really any grip. It's sort of a matte-like finish. So as you wear the boot in, it does start to feel really one-to-one with your foot, which is really nice. That's something that I really enjoy about this boot. And as far as the upper goes and the lockdown goes, I think it does a really nice job of wrapping your foot in all the areas. And to be fair, breaking in the area on this lateral side where my foot is widest, I actually was able to break it in totally fine on that width. So for me, this is an excellent, excellent upper, and I wish that they had brought this upper into the 0.1 model so that you could have laces with an upper that's this soft. They're actually different, which is really disappointing, unfortunately, but this upper with the Plus model for me is an 8.5 out of 10. Lockdown for this football boot is where this boot kind of struggles, and I think this boot is really, really good except for the lockdown. And so for me, this is going to get a lot of a lower score. It is a laceless football boot. I do think they did an okay job with this laceless portion, although I do think the laceless part and that collar area of the speed flow is actually much better. It wraps your foot, in my opinion, a lot more snugly, and it just does a nice job of making sure that your foot doesn't slip around too much if you have grip socks and stuff on. Whereas these, yes, are easier to get in because you have more flexibility through this knit material in where the laces would be. But for me, the lockdown really struggles with this boot. Once you start to wear it in games and in training sessions, that's where this boot kind of falls apart. And that's also the reason for the lower score on the heel comfort area, because the lockdown, or the lack of lockdown, often comes kind of in this area here. And so the back of my foot, even though the front of my foot here is super snug and it feels amazing and actually has a beautiful shape to it, my heel area twists, it turns when I am going to plant the ball, when I'm going to plant and turn the other direction, I often get a ton of sliding laterally inside the heel area. So for me, the lockdown is gonna get a 5 out of 10. Break-in time for the X Speedportal Pluses is actually really nice for a boot that's most kind of synthetic feeling. I know that this is a little bit of a knit material as well, but for me, this boot actually broke in really nice. Part of that could be the lacing system, and because it is laceless, so there is essentially tons of flexibility as far as getting my foot in there, and the material just kind of has to wrap around my foot, given that there's nothing kind of pulling it tight, if that makes sense. But for me, the break-in time was super easy on these. I would say it hurt a little bit on the outside of my foot just because that's where the boot tends to be the thinnest. The shape of this X Speedportal is much more round and neutral shaped from kind of this area forward, and right down here is where my foot is the widest on the lateral side. So if that makes sense, that portion just gave me a little bit of hot spot right at the beginning. I would say it took me about 2 to 3 hours of like proper wear time, proper play time for that to go away, and for me to now be able to slip into these anytime I want and play with no issues at all. So for me, the break-in time was a 7 out of 10. Durability and build quality of this boot has actually been really, really good. I've worn these quite a bit in training and on my own, doing my own speed. You guys have seen the speed session video and all that, and the quality has been really good. The original green pair that I actually reviewed way back in the fall, I believe, of 2022, that, which you guys can go check out as well. So that one, after that 1 month review, I gave those boots to my now head coach, who gave them to a player who now currently plays, who still wears them. And they're in great condition. The sole plate hasn't ripped or anything. And on these, the only reason why the studs are scuffed is because in order to get to train on this pitch, we actually have to walk on concrete about, 50 meters or something over to the facility where all of our locker space is. So obviously it's going to grind down these studs a little bit, but as far as durability on the outside, and honestly the color is still amazing. I've washed them off just a little bit with some water and a sponge or a towel, but there's no, even on this left side boot, there's just little scuff marks on the side, but there's no separation on any of these seams or anything. And I've pretty much exclusively worn these on AG pitches. I wore them once or twice on an FG pitch back right when I got them first. But for the most part, these are awesome. So for me, the durability and build quality is going to get an 8.5 out of 10. Shape and fit for this football boot for me is really nice. It does fit about, I know this is going to sound crazy, but like 1/8 of a size long. It's just a tiny bit long. That being said, my perspective is coming at it from somebody who loves to have my toes like jammed up against the front. I just like to have a much more snug fit and feel in my football boots. So these have a little bit of extra space similar to the GXs, but as you break them in, they start to feel super one-to-one on your feet. So for me, these are gonna fit most foot types, especially because they, as opposed to the Speed Flow, which was a lot more, not necessarily narrow, but it was much more angular in the toe area. They gave a little more width here in the toe area and toe box, and a little more rounded shape. So it's much more neutral and it'll fit, I think, most foot types. So for me, shape and fit of this boot is really nice. It's an 8.5 out of 10. All right, so competition for this boot is basically everything in the speed category. So you've got the Vapor 15 and Superfly 9 from Nike. You've got the New Balance Furon version 7 from the New Balance brand. You've got the Morelia Neo 3 DNA, and I guess you could throw in the Mizuno Alpha as well from the Mizuno brand. And what else? The Puma Ultra Ultimate. So you've got kind of basically, this competes with basically everything in the speed boot category. And for me, the shape and fit of this boot is actually one of the best, I think, behind maybe the New Balance Furon. The reason I'm not including the DS Lite X Fly 4 and 5 is because I would consider that a little bit more on the control type boot. I guess it is a speed boot. If you include those are my top. But as far as like shape and fit goes, these are really good. It's just, I'm not going to put them towards the top of the list just because of the lockdown issues from being a laceless football boot. Now, one of the things that I might do in a future video is keep these and actually poke laces on the kind of ridge of where this knit material is and actually throw laces in here to see if I can get a little more lockdown and see if I could use these more regularly in a training session. But because they don't have laces right now, I tend to do my own sessions in them because I can kind of control the pace, because once I start doing normal team sessions and I'm running around and I'm making movements that are reactionary, as soon as you start to incorporate reactionary movements, you really need to have boots that fit solidly on your feet, because otherwise blisters are going to happen all the time. So for me, this I think falls sort of middle of the pack because I can actually wear them. They're going to be above Vapor and Superfly 9, Vapor 15, Superfly 9. They're going to be above Ultra Ultimate, which I think is the bottom of the list. I don't like that boot at all, even though it looks kind of cool. And it's going to be probably above Mizuno Alpha just because, and don't yell at me, I know I said in that video that that's probably the #1 boot I would wear if I could actually fit in it, but the point of this competition list is that I actually fit in these. So that's your answer there. So I would say this is kind of middle top of the pack. If they had laces, I reckon these would be up there with some of the best speed boots on the market. So for me, yeah, middle of the pack. Performance for the Speedportal Plus is going to be dead average. I think the boot construction, the durability, the shape and the fit, all of that is great stuff. It's just, again, the lockdown is really tough with a laceless boot. Boot brands haven't quite yet figured out how to get the lockdown to happen with a laceless boot, just because you don't have any of that adjustability that you get with a lacing system. And so for me, this boot is a 7 out of 10 for performance. Overall, this is a really nice football boot. I really like the shape and fit of the X Speedportal Plus. I think, again, the durability and build quality is great. I think the performance you get from the sole plate is really nice, even though it doesn't have carbon. Would I recommend you buy a boot like this? Now that it doesn't have carbon, is it as special? No, but it's still a really nice football boot. I think I really wish Adidas would just make the laced version exactly the same as this, just put a lacing system onto this football boot essentially, and I think you would get way more customers into the Speedflow line. I know they're coming out with a new version really soon, which I think is called the Superfast or Speedfast, or I'll try to find it and put it up on screen, just the name of it, but Crazy Fast, maybe? I think it's the X Crazy Fast. Anyway, point being is that I don't know if I can recommend this boot over something like a New Balance Furon, any of the Asics or Mizuno products. If you fit in the Vapor and Superfly, those are fantastic options as well. I would definitely say I like these over the Puma Ultra Ultimate, but again, it's just up to personal preference. So for me, the overall rating of this football boot is going to get a 7 out of 10. It's very average. It lacks that specialness that came with that carbon sole. It was the only one on the market that had, the carbon in it, and I think that was such a cool feature, and it was definitely something that pulled people into this silo as opposed to some of the other silos on the market that are in the speed category. So that's it for the 1 month review of the X Speedportal Plus with the new updated sole plate without the Carbitex. If you guys have any extra questions about this boot, leave them down in the comments section below. Hope you guys enjoyed that video. If you did, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. If you guys are interested in talking about boots, your own footballing career, you guys want advice on how to move forward in the college, pro game, in your youth career, definitely go check out my website. I'll leave the link down below and you guys can schedule a Zoom call. I've been really excited about meeting with a few of you who have been on Zoom recently. It has been absolutely awesome. So very much looking forward to that. So first link down in the description box below if you guys want to do a one-on-one Zoom call. As always, be awesome. Take care. I'll see you guys in the next video.